Cats and kittens, and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter. Tonight, it's my pleasure to bring to you Zach Barocas of Jawbox, Bells, Camorra, Bright Christ, and most recently, New Freedom. Zach is the owner of stationery store Measure Twice. Aside from being a celebrated percussionist, Zach has appeared in Modern Drummer and has an endorsement with Ludwig. This evening we get to talk about everything from the DC hardcore scene, jazz, improvisational music, his depth of love for the recording process, and how he has strayed from the path of the normal recording situation to make it something all his own. So without further ado, I bring to you Zach Barocas on the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. All right. So I don't know how, I know you're not familiar with the podcast or the format that I do per se, so that's probably a good thing, because my first question is always, what is it that terrifies you at the most existential core of your being? What is it that just completely seizes you with fear?
What seizes me with fear? What seizes me with fear? It's like the harder I think about it, the more elusive it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something like Shark Attack, you know. But it might be, in its broadest sense, suffering. Suffering terrifies me.
Right.
It terrifies me when I see other people suffering. It terrifies me the prospect of my own suffering. Because it seems like that can be kind of sustained in a way that's just, well, terrifying as it goes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that shows a great amount of empathy as far as your character is concerned, in my opinion. I mean,
well,
I've not gotten that answer before out of the 20-some interviews I've done thus far. It's always a bit more personal, so that's refreshing. That's a refreshing answer. And kind of makes sense taking into consideration your musical output. I mean, taking, Jawbox into consideration, like there's always that socially aware aspect, even though like lyrically maybe a lot more elusive and personal. There was always,
I think so. I mean, Jay's always got a head for well, I mean, in Jawbox we all wrote lyrics, but of course he had to sing them, so it's
right.
In the end it's his it's kind of his platform. But I think there's never been any question that all of this is happening in the world.
Right.
It's not like we're not in a lab coming up with these things. And certainly as we've dealt with playing again, it's a very different situation. I mean, it's a different situation now than it was in 2019, but 2019 was very different from 1996 or 7,
Sure.
But I think that's something that we always try to keep an eye on. Looking out for other people somehow.
So where does that journey for you, I guess, start musically? Like what age were you when you started? Because like you've been in Modern Drummer, you're a very celebrated percussionist.
I'm an occasionally luminary figure. I think a luminous figure. It's certainly not a constant, but I poke my head up once in a while.
Right.
Or I'm pulled back from oblivion occasionally, I suppose. But no, I mean, I started playing when I was very young, like everybody else. I was, I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a music program, and I started playing drums, a drum set when I was 11, which is 41 years ago. So, and there have been stretches, I guess, in the meantime where I haven't played, but they are relatively few.
Right.
Like as a kid, I was always in bands. And then as I got older, I was, a teenager, I was always in bands. And I think there have been uh, some of it, like for a lot of us, some of it's more prominent as I've gotten older, perhaps than other stuff. I think Jawbox obviously will always be
Oh yeah.
more or less what I'm known for, uh, but there's always music. Even the stuff I've been working on, New Freedom.
Right.
I don't drum very much comparatively, you know, uh, but I still think of it as drumming music, you know.
Well, it's percussive in nature, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
I think that tends to be how I relate to things.
there's
Uh,
almost sort of kind of like an electro and hip hop inflection to it, even though it's not like forward in the music. I think it's definitely
well, I think the method's probably not too far afield from that. I mean, uh, in the end, it's a lot of looping and
mhm.
a lot of layering, uh, which was pretty new to me. Although I think the overall compositional strategy, if there is one, isn't a whole lot different from my last band, Bells.
Yeah,
Uh,
bells.
it's just not guitars, and we're not writing these things together as
Right.
much, you know. So on Bells, we were much more of a regular band. We practiced a lot. It took a long time to write stuff and make records, and New Freedom really uh, has much more to do with how am I going to handle someone's contribution,
Right.
right? So everyone's contributing whatever they want. I mean, I give them some guidance, but uh, you know, it really kind of all comes out of whatever me and Gordon, the cellist Gordon Withers, whatever we're doing first, everything
Mhm.
comes out of that.
Yeah.
But but the idea of repeating figures and seeing sort of how long you can do something before it caves in, uh, that's always interesting to me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
You know?
we have examples of that as far back as Pink Floyd with these
Oh, sure.
experimentations, these sonic experimentations where repetitions involved certainly, but it's almost like the decay of the repetition where things can
Yeah.
become they can warp just naturally, even though you're
Right.
using maybe unnatural means.
Well, in the end, like every sound, if, at least for the for uh, I mean, I suppose electronically, right? You could suspend a sound, uh, or sustain a sound indefinitely.
Yeah.
And there's stuff like Lamont Young's work, of course, in these 45-minute drones. Uh, John Cage has a piece that I think it's something crazy. Like there's a change every like 28 years.
Hmm.
There's a chord change, and so someone is performing this somewhere. Keeping an eye on the clock and making sure that when they're at measure, 72,043, like they hit the C or whatever it is. But I think for most of us, like it has to end, you know.
Right.
Um, but I guess the question becomes: are you setting up a musical environment in which uh, those events are sort of properly addressed? So
Right.
in a song like I don't know, Minor Threats in My Eyes, right?
Yeah.
There's verses and choruses, and I mean, it's got all the elements of a regular song. It's compressed and it happens very quickly.
Yeah.
Uh, Whereas a song, something that comes to mind every time I think of this is Gillian Welch's "Time the Revelator,"
Hmm.
right? Which is a very long song relative to the rest of her work, but it's really the same thing as the rest of her work. It's not like a weird song.
Right. It's
It
just
just
epic
takes her
in
a lot
scope.
longer. Yeah, it just takes her a lot longer to get through it, and I think that's something that uh, I don't know. That's a real middle aged thought for me. I didn't think much about that when I was younger. I think when I was younger, it was much more important to sort of bang it out. Everything was more a question of stamina somehow, you know.
Well, yeah, coming from hardcore especially.
Yeah, well, and my hardcore years were pretty fleeting. Uh,
Hmm.
like I came out of a life of a lot of jamming and a lot of just the regular rock canon, I
Yeah.
suppose. But then once I met the punk kids, like they wanted to play faster, so I learned to do that. But uh, I was perfectly fine with not doing that, as well.
I think that's evident in the context of Jawbox too, because it took
Sure.
everything that was really fantastic about DC hardcore and the Revolution Summer sort of like movement, and
Hmm.
also added a lot of melodicism and a lot of really, really structured, well thought out, like just pop songs. They're great.
Sure. A lot of that's Jay. I mean, his like the first two records, especially. Um,
Yeah, but the drumming was very tasteful. Let's face it. It's not like you were just trying to
oh,
bash
I was
through
thinking
the.
of before I joined the band.
Yeah,
Most of those songs were written, on Grip and Novelty. Like those are really Jay minded songs.
yeah,
And then I think some of my playing on Sweetheart and Self Titled had as much to do with trying to play around that. Like so Jay's got this idea of structure and this idea of melody or harmony, um, and almost like how close can we get to disrupting that without making a mess of it,
right.
you know?
But I think especially on For Your Own Special Sweetheart, that album, in my opinion, I like Jawbox before that, but that's when it really made a lot of sense to me, because
Oh, sure.
at
Yeah.
that time period, everything was changing as far as the quote unquote scene was concerned. We
Yeah.
weren't just, you know, minute and a half songs like two chords and the truth. It started to
Right.
become about something else. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
I think that there's a couple records that come to mind when I think of that sea change in the music, but For Your Own Special Sweetheart that's like a flagship album for that. And to me, it seems like you haven't done anything that, like you set the bar really high for yourself and you never went below it. Everything musically you've accomplished has retained a very, very high level.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that. I think there's sort of uh, I mean, the, the good side of that, um, is that it's always, whatever I'm working on is exciting
Right.
to me. Right. And so I don't know how exciting it is, down the road, but, uh, I spent a lot of time, particularly when I was younger, not wanting to repeat myself.
Mhm.
So, y- but I also don't go too far from home, right? So I've never made a record that wasn't recorded by Jay.
Mhm.
So like the Up on N. Jay did the Up on N record. He did the Bells records. He did the stuff I didn't do at home. He did the New Freedom record. Um,
He did the Camorra one too, right? Or
so
Camorra?
yeah, we did that at Jay's too. Camorra, yeah. Um, so I mean, I have a pretty the people I'm genuinely interested in working with, the number of people that I trust that with seems to be smaller than I would necessarily like sometimes, but it's a good group of people, and even sitting down with Gordon now, um, I met Gordon when we did the first Bells record, which I think was 2010. Like
Mhm.
it's all starting to be a while ago now. But it's I mean, I don't know. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this, uh, and talking to my wife about it the day before. Like, I can't imagine starting a band right now. I can't imagine like getting in a room with three or four other people and starting to write songs that are supposed to be, I don't know, like a verse and a chorus and a verse and a bridge and like I can't imagine going through all of that right now.
Under current
Which I think is
circumstances.
partly. Yeah, well, I don't even mean like with COVID as much as I mean uh the kind of work that is. I don't have people in New York uh, that I would want to do that with. I don't know anybody I'd want to do that with up there. You
Mhm.
know, uh, so I mean, which is part of what led to doing New Freedom was it's a way for me to come. I'm actually in Baltimore right now to come down here and work with people I want to collaborate with. Uh, but then I can go home and finish it. You know,
Yeah.
um, but it's yeah. I don't know. I drifted there on you. I'm sorry about that. But
No, no.
I think I appreciate that each of us in our way. There's sort of two ways of looking at this. One of them is uh, musicians who kind of find their place, and Albini describes it like that. Bands that keep drilling down into the one thing they do. And of course, he's in one of those bands, right?
Yeah.
Like Shellac. I don't know that there's any real way to distinguish between new shellac and old shellac. Like they
Yeah.
just sound like shellac.
They always do,
Uh,
yeah.
and then there are bands that are and musicians who are kind of constantly on the move, and it's a little harder to keep track of what they're doing because they're, 1 minute they're a regular four-piece guitar band, and then the next minute they're doing electronic stuff, and then somebody splits and does a score for some movie, and then somebody's over here doing something else, and uh, I think I
Basically,
tend towards the latter,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, basically
But I
Radiohead.
mean, I'm always, yeah, kind of, I mean, like in the end, you're stuck with yourself, right? So there's only like that's what you got to live with. But uh, I do think there's something to be said for always trying to get somewhere else.
I agree,
But
and
it,
like imagine just listening to AC/DC for the rest of your life. I love AC/DC, but
yeah,
for the sake of
I
Christ,
love
like
ACDC enough. I can't remember the last time I listened to them,
right.
but I know it was fun.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know,
but and like AC/DC and the Ramones are 2 great examples.
yeah,
They do what they do so well that they just keep doing it, and well, the Ramones
yeah,
obviously not anymore, but,
sure,
they got the formula. They have 3 or 4 songs that they change a little bit and just sporadically hit you with it in different ways, but it's the
yeah.
same formula, and it's great, but
Well, there's the
I
matter too of like training somehow, right? Like if uh, I still listen to a fair amount of jazz, right?
mhm,
And so uh, if I'm listening to a Sonny Rollins session from 1958 versus a Sonny Rollins session from 1988,
mhm,
uh, because I listen to Sonny Rollins, I can tell the difference.
yeah,
I can hear the difference in his development and his ideas about what his kind of improvisation is over the course of that time. But if someone doesn't know those things and never listens to jazz, it just sounds like jazz,
right.
Like it sounds like here's on the one hand there's old jazz and then this sounds like less old jazz. But
Yeah,
it
but
it doesn't.
those are people who don't understand, like, the hard bop movement and modal
Yeah,
jazz, like
yeah. Like it's not their. I mean, I tend to feel this way about like the Ramones. Are a band I don't like. I've never particularly liked them.
right.
Uh, Mostly, I think because I keep waiting for something else to happen. And to your point, like the thing that makes them great is exactly the thing that turns me off
Right,
personally.
right.
Uh, but it's and that's where I think you know my guess is that people who are if I as a Sonny Rollins fan, I do expect certain things from him, right? Like if I showed up, if he released a record where he was playing trumpet, I'm not sure how I would feel about that, right? Like that seems too far afield uh, of what I expect. So it sometimes the ice thins, I think, when we try our experiments, But
Right, but just so long as you are playing to your strengths no matter what you're trying, I think you're gonna be okay, and oh, I lost you. Alright, we lost Zach. Let's see if he chimes back in. So where we left off, I was going to draw the comparison between Miles Davis kind of blue versus Miles Davis bitches brew.
Sure. Yeah.
They're still both Miles Davis. They're still both, beautiful examples of a master at different heights of his powers, but they're vastly different. They're so glaringly different that, I think, yes, to the untrained ear, it's still just just jazz, but to someone like you or I, we can see and hear the growth in it and the depth of experimentation in it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that comes across in the difference between the Margin Walker EP and Red Medicine, right? I mean, like,
Oh yeah,
eventually you're not. Well, I think you lose people along the way. I mean, there's people who don't want to hear. There's people who just want to hear Waiting Room.
right.
In our case, who, it's not lost on us that none of us has had a project since Jawbox that's as popular as Jawbox, right? So, Bells didn't play. I mean, people came out to see us, but not in the numbers that came out to see Jawbox, and certainly not in the numbers that came out to see Jawbox a few years ago. So, but to me, it's all the same. It's all the same path, right? Yeah. So, and I suspect that's true for most of us who are kind of former members of one thing or another, and I don't personally, I think there were years when it upset me because I didn't understand, and because I was a jerk, and I thought I was entitled to something I wasn't getting, you know what I mean? Like, but eventually what looking back on it, quitting drinking helped straighten out some of that, but I think, in the end, it didn't really matter because I'm just kind of following my nose.
Yeah.
And it's leading me to these other kinds of music. So,
well, especially,
I can't expect everyone to be interested in that. You know what I mean? Like I'm charting my own course. That's not everybody's course.
And you have to take into consideration the fact too that we're playing, like I still play music myself, and we're both involved in a generation that's like they're way younger than us at this point. So a lot of the people coming out to see Jawbox were not around when Jawbox was a band. I remember getting into verbal altercations with people from my scene who got pissed when Jawbox did a cover of Cornflake Girl and it was all over 120 minutes and they were like, they sold out, man. I was like, why? Sure. They did a Tori Amos cover. I fucking love this.
Right.
But it's you lose people the more you expand yourself, and unfortunately that is what it is to be kind of involved in the underground. People feel a sense of entitlement when it comes to a band they're not even fucking in.
Everyone's got an opinion. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own.
It's a sense of propriety, though. People have a sense of propriety over bands that they are not in, and I'm guilty of it, for Christ's sake, because there was that point where, when Pearl Jam came out and Eddie Vedder was espousing the virtues of Fugazi, and I didn't hate Fugazi for it, but there were all those instant grunge people in 1991, 92 who were like, yeah, Fugazi. I was like, okay.
Well, and I mean, they did, on the one hand, like I imagine this happens to every scene, that if you talk to the Strokes, it happened to their shows too. If you talk to whoever's playing, I don't know, Baby's All Right here in New York, it's going to happen to them too, right? That, eventually, if everyone's going to try to make a living, you're going to have to play to people who aren't part of the tribe. You're going to have to get out there, and I think I never know I don't worry about that side of it too much. You know what I mean? I certainly know we were not very good at selling out. like that.
No,
It didn't
no.
pay. It didn't pay much. You know what I mean? So as that goes, and of course, all we ended up doing was writing Chinese fork tie anyway. Like it wasn't. We didn't really have a clear sense of what that would involve, and
I love Chinese fork tie, but
yeah, it's a fun song. It's certainly it's one of the ones I'm glad I can still play. Uh, there's but I think looking at it from like at the time, what we wanted was more resources to make records.
Said you were 10 feet tall, yeah, and bulletproof. 10 feet tall, yeah, and bulletproof. Armored character makes it hard to move, but here's an impartial overview. At the bottom, they all want proof, and at the top, no one's making room. So brace yourself and then accelerate. Sure, you'll get there soon. I watch you work. I watch you work. I watch you work. Take the big man down. Foresight, jump down. Take the big man down. Foresight, jump down. I am wide-eyed, waiting on the truth, but I'm thinking of ways to silence you. Close at hand, commonplace and cold, rude joke, character. Yeah, take the big man down. Foresight, jump down. Yeah, take the big man down. Foresight, jump down.
Yeah, and we got it. So it worked out well, and that we were able to buy those tapes back
I still can't believe that you guys pulled
for
that
next
off.
to nothing, really. I mean, it wasn't nothing, but it was nothing compared to what they cost in the first place, and and give all of that a whole new life. You know what I mean? It really, like, in the end, it couldn't have worked out better.
Especially since it's 100% self-driven at this point. You have that's all.
Yeah.
It's all under DeSoto at this point, right?
Yeah, and Discord takes care of the record label part, but it's all us. It's all Kim.
God, that's incredible. I mean, and then when we move onward through your timeline, and like Bell's was still on independent labels, but you still retained the
that was even
masters
me.
for that.
I mean, the Bell's records came out. The Up on In record came out on a label that was run by our friend Mahmoud Sheikh, who actually books Jawbox now.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a label with a friend of his in Boston. Mahmoud was in Boston anyway. I don't remember where the other guy was, but that was in 2000.
Yeah,
we put that record out, and I guess we own the masters wherever they are. Actually, that's not Jay found them when Inner Ear, the recording studio in Arlington, closed. Jay found the Up on In tapes, so we might take another swing at those. But then Bell's the Cultural Society, which is the poetry publishing company. I use the word company broadly. That my wife and I have had for 20 years. That we put out the Bell's records because it seemed like that band very deliberately didn't want to do anything. We just wanted to make the music, like that, and get out there and play it and have it be on records and not worry too much about it. And that was a good way to do it. I think it was okay to not get all, tangled up in BMI and trying to figure out a licensing strategy when none of us really cared about that, I don't think. Or it didn't seem that way. We might have a different conversation about that now, but
I still got my hands on the records, so obviously you guys did something right.
Yeah. Well, and similarly, like, this is the story for a lot of us, because I had a relationship with Discord 400 years ago. you know, pretty much if I put out a record, they'll help with the distribution,
Yeah.
and then of course DeSoto, they help with anything the Jawbox wants to do.
Mhm.
Some things don't make sense. The live record didn't make any sense to do with Discord because it's really long. And when we put it up on Bandcamp, there was no plan of doing vinyl or anything.
Yeah.
But then Arctic Rodeo picked it, like they want to do it. That might not be public news yet. I might have just blown
Okay.
that. But
I can burn that. I can scrub that if you want me to.
yeah, please do. But so
Yeah, I will.
arrangements have been made.
Okay. Well, that's excellent news.
To work on that, and they're actually putting out the new Freedom vinyl too.
I knew
which
that.
I think that might be knowledge.
I think it is because I'd known that as well.
Okay.
And Arctic Rodeo also put out the collection of like B-sides and rarities for you guys too.
Yeah, Scrapbook of Fatal Accidents. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they do. I mean, those guys just love old people and their music. Is sort of the way that works. Like they did the Burning Airlines stuff. They did. Yeah. I think they might have done a Channels vinyl issue.
I believe so. They
like Jay. And they did the Pilot to Gunner stuff, and they did the Skeleton Key record, and all kinds of people.
Garrett Klon from Texas is the Reason. His band after Texas is the Reason, New Rising Suns. They did two of their records.
And Chamberlain, I think, is the one that just came out, right?
They did.
So those guys are great, and I couldn't be happier. Like one of the strange things about doing New Freedom is that it doesn't, it's not like the music that I am known for,
right?
Or that generally that my associations are known for.
I think the older we
those
get,
guys,
we expect to get something unexpected from people that came from, because I'm on the wrong side of 40 myself. I'm going to be 46. That there's that era, I guess, that you and I sort of share, where everybody that we grew up sort of loving for doing one thing, when they changed, you either bailed or you stayed the course and enjoyed the change. And if you kind of manned the change, you tend to really gravitate towards people who don't repeat themselves.
Sure. I feel that way, about a lot of artists. And I just, with regards to my obnoxious remark earlier, I think that what one senses if one's part of that trip is like you learn the language. So if even the slightest change becomes a change, and I think about that a lot with Jay's music. Jay kind of starting probably with Office of Future Plans really hit on a very different approach. Or it sounds like a very different approach to how he wants his songs to go. Like what's the engine in the song? It's not, he's much more involved with other counter melody, say, than harmony than he used to be. Like harmony's always been his thing. But I think playing with Gordon, there's all these other melodies that are suddenly possible because he's got either a cellist playing guitar or a cellist playing cello, which either way, brings a different kind of thing. But if you weren't also a Channels fan, it might just not sound like Jawbox. That might be as far as you get with it. But I find that increasingly uninteresting as I get older. Like I want to know the in between. I want to follow those changes. And it's a smaller, a lot of the music I listen to. To me, these people are huge. But I don't know how many people are actually buying, Tamika Reed records. I know it's more than are buying Zach Barocas records, but like. To me, like I'm kind of hanging on everything she releases, and I missed. There's a performance last night at Carnegie Hall of an Afrofuturism show that was put on that contained, among which were at least 3 artists I would have gone to see individually if I had been up to date on any of this.
Right.
I had to work anyway, like I couldn't get over there, but I was pretty sad to not be there. But that's
But the
part, to me. So
that
to me, like I hang on every word. Susie Ibarra to me is a god,
yeah,
but I don't know that everyone knows who Susie Ibarra is.
people who
Uh,
aren't really deeply entrenched in it, and this sort of culture, that no, they're probably not going to know, but that's not who it's there for.
well, and it almost doesn't matter, right? Like,
Right.
because from the standpoint of being able to go see her play occasionally, or being able to enjoy her music at home, uh, I'm fine.
Mm.
Like as a fan, as an audience member, I'm totally satisfied. And she's been able to make a living at it for whatever, I don't know, which she's been doing this since the early 90s.
Yeah.
And she's another one who started out she was a jazz drummer. Like that was her, she was in the David S. Ware Quartet, and that was kind of the first thing she was known for. But she made a record last year that involved recording a lot of water.
Yeah.
Like, I'm into that.
Oh, I
I don't know
mean,
if I'm going to record water, but like, I'm glad somebody's doing it, because I would never
that's
think of that.
like the band Neurosis, one of my all-time favorite bands that came
Uh-huh.
from hardcore is Neurosis, and their alter ego Tribes of Neurot made an entire album out of insect noises. Insect
I
noises.
mean, that's I mean, that, to me, like, it's not something you put on every day,
No, but
but
wow.
I'm glad someone did it. Yeah. And I
There's
think by degree, like some people think that, plugging in a guitar is far out, right? Like they don't, it really is relative, but I get very excited about, I mean, some of the experiments don't work.
right.
For all we know, the insect record was a failure. We don't know what it was supposed to sound like, but
Right.
chances are they didn't either.
Yeah,
Like
they just
chances are they were kind of rolling with it, and they'd get some kind of groove going with the material, and then it ends up being, it's done. They know there's nothing left to do to it, so out it goes. You
yeah.
know.
Yeah, and the fact that you could actually get something like that to a point where it's releasable and divorce yourself from it enough to put it out into the world, more power to you.
It's hard.
But
I think in
it
my
is
own
hard.
way, that was what I went through with New Freedom, because I'm not a singer, like I had never recorded my own vocals or anything like that, or had them be part of anything. I had certainly never recorded a bunch of stuff and then gone home and worried about it. That was
Mhm.
new. I'd never made a record without guitars. That's the first, part of the New Freedom. The freedom is freedom from guitars. That there's no guitars or basses on that record. There's an upright. Mark
There's
Cisneros plays upright, but
still,
there's
and
no electric guitars in there. And man,
you
what a
got Mark,
relief!
you got Mark Cisneros on that record. Wow.
Yeah, well, he's playing everything. I mean, he's playing saxophones, and he's playing flute, and he's playing bass clarinet, and he's playing percussion, and he's playing upright bass. And did I mention the trombone? He plays trombone.
That's
Like,
fucking. He's a talent. That's a
yeah,
talent.
he's also he's an incredibly warm and lively spirit. Like, having that guy on the scene is a real shot in the arm. And I think the point of putting that group together still is kind of, who else can I get in on this? So
It,
when we found our oboist, Lenny Young, lives in Pittsburgh. We hadn't met him. We met him on Facebook. I said, "Does anybody know an oboist?" And a guy I used to know down here in Maryland said, "My college roommate plays oboe," and that's how I met Lenny. And then he came out and blew us away with his oboe, which isn't something you get to say every day, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
and Jay does, Jay played piano as a kid, but he's not like I think he's a piano player. He doesn't quite think so yet, but and then my stepsister, if I can say that, use that word, at the age of 52, but she plays viola, so she's going to come up on this next session, and play some viola. The vocals, Janet Morgan, Jay's wife, who played in Channels with
Yep.
him. She's contributing to the vocals on the new pieces, which is a whole other, it's not only because it's her voice, but it's because it's not mine. It's like it's a completely different tone, a completely different voice. But to keep roping people into this, and really being able to say, do what you want. I mean, you
That's
have to
like,
do it over here, but do anything you want, but you can't plug in to do it. And I get to decide how it ends up.
do you know how much this reminds me of the idea of the Kind of Blue record?
Oh, sure.
If
Yeah.
you think about it, because all they did was pick a mode, like, okay, here's what key it's going to be in, go.
Yeah.
Like, I will get Final Cut, but do what you want to do and let it
Sure.
rip. That is so jazz-minded of you to approach
Well, I think
it.
any chance to be a band leader,
All drummers are band leaders.
all good drummers are band leaders.
Yes. Yes.
But I think like I've never played in a group where the membership was chosen for any other reason than friendship.
Yeah, me
Right.
too.
So playing, even when I joined Jawbox, it's because I lived in the house. Like I was already there. They didn't have to go any farther than my bedroom to find a drummer, kind of. But the up on in was, I worked at the video store with Ryan, with the guitar player, and Charlie was a friend. They didn't have a band, so we started one. I didn't have a band either at that time. And then Bell's, I had to get a practice space for, it was when Jawbox played on Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
And since I had a practice space, I called my friends, Steve and Chris, and said, you guys want to start an instrumental band? And they said, yes. And then that was that. But they hadn't met, they didn't know each other. Like and it all works out, or it doesn't, pretty quickly. But I think, New Freedom was the same thing. Like it was just, I don't remember meeting Mark in person before we played. They played with Jawbox, or the last shows we played before COVID. Hammered Hulse played with us.
Yeah.
And, I might have met him back in Medications. But I was just like, man, we got to do something. We ended up having a conversation about Meredith Monk. I don't even know how we got there, but It was, and I was like, I had a plan. I wanted to cover one of her pieces, and he was like, I'd love to do that. And then that was the beginning of all of this. I ended up ditching the Meredith Monk idea, but
the fact
it's
that someone else would actually think that was an amazing idea is band worthy.
Believe me, man, it was not lost on me, and that I was in an unusual company. And my only regret is that I can't pay everybody a lot of money to come and do this with me. But
if you,
like I said, I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you present an idea that novel to a bunch of good musicians, they're gonna fucking do it, whether you give them money or not, Zach. Think about it.
I mean, that's proven to be true, right? Because everyone has something else they're doing. Nobody's waiting for me to pay their rent.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is a way. It is a way to kind of, I felt this way. I'm a Ludwig artist.
Yeah.
And I don't get free stuff. Like I'm not a famous Ludwig artist, but I was pretty stoked. I mean, I played Ludwig drums anyway, and that's all I've ever played anyway. But there is a certain recognition associated with that I'm pleased with, Mm-hmm. And they're awesome. They're a great company, and they've been very helpful, and they make some things that would be difficult very easy when we're touring. And I look at it that way, like what can Ludwig do for me? Well, they can do X, Y, and Z. I can be this level artist, and that's the endorsement. And in a way, I think asking people to come and play on a project that is that's mine. It's not like a band in that sense, and they, they know that I'm going to go home and do something else with what we have when we leave the studio. So I think to kind of dignify it, I would like to be able to give them money.
Sure.
Like it would in the same way. But I think at the same time, like everyone involved has had the same kind of feeling of being able to do something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Well,
I mean, for all the instruments that Mark plays, uh, I think we're the only group where he gets to bring them all, every
well,
single one.
yeah.
I actually require him to bring every single. He doesn't have to bring the vibraphone, but everything else, I want it there because he might want to blow into it or shake it or whatever he does to it.
Yeah.
Um, and same thing with Lenny. Lenny for our next session acquired an English horn, which is like an oboe with a little bell, sort of like a
Mhm.
tapir nose at the end. He got his hands on one of those, so we're gonna, bring it. Like, why wouldn't we bring it? I'm not exactly sure what the difference in sound is, but we'll find out. And he also apparently plays he's a recorder player and has a battery of recorders in all
Wow.
sizes. So I don't even think I realized the recorders came in different sizes.
Yes, and you know what? The only reason I know that is I was in a high school jazz band, and we
Yeah.
played a
So,
giant.
so was Lenny.
We played a giant stadium in 1991 or 92 when I was still
That's
in high
great.
school. Yeah, and that's the only reason I would know that, though, because to me,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
predicate
that's how that goes.
to
Yeah.
that, like I thought the recorder was something they gave to you in first grade and is a little plastic.
Yeah, I'm not even
like,
sure I knew it was an instrument that people. It seemed to me an instrument that one played, like if you couldn't get your hands on your clarinet, or
Yeah.
or like to get ready to play a real instrument, you would play a recorder. But
Yeah, they used to call it a
this guy's
flutophone.
right, yeah. So, but his talent is irrefutable, and he's
Oh
a
yeah.
wonderful addition to the group, and so he should bring that. Janet got a clarinet that we're not sure if it works. Mark's going to take a look at it. But I think it'd be great if she came over and played clarinet.
I mean,
Why not? Someone has to.
And the way I'm looking
Mark
at
can't
this,
play everything. Yeah.
this is so it legitimately is like you're playing like Duke Ellington at this point. Like, you're just
Well,
you're assembling your pieces. He was a little bit more of a dictator, though. You're assembling more pieces
sure.
to allow themselves to express themselves in the milieu of your own creation. It's very, very enticing.
Well, because
As a musician, I would jump on it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. I mean, what I'm trying to do is take, so say on a raw version of a piece that Mark's actually playing to when he's recording. There's say on tenor, there might be 3 passes where one tenor saxophone where he's actually simply improvising for 7 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a pass where we go through and he's, maybe he has an idea to harmonize with one of the cellos, or he's got something specific that really is immediately loop friendly.
Yeah.
Where he's just got a melody or something, or maybe he's going to harmonize with himself or something. And part of what I do later is try to honor that. I don't want to I don't want him to feel like he's just handing me stuff.
Right.
And I want them to be excited about it later, right? There was one of the pieces, everybody had good stuff for except me. The beat I had for it originally, I was very disappointed with once I heard how well everyone else was playing and where they were going. And I had just gotten some these wonderful cowbells. And so I recut all the drums and percussion and completely changed the feel of the thing, and had to turn some of their stuff around to accommodate that. But it became a completely different number. And so I sent it to everybody and said, is this all right? Like, I know this isn't what we thought we were doing.
Yeah.
And they loved it. I mean, if you open any tune that opens with 2 different cowbells, like somebody's going to be excited, right? You're either going to clear the room or you found your people. But I think working that way also bodes well for future sessions, because Mark's thinking about what can I bring to these pieces? What can I bring to these sessions? And I think everyone's sort of saving up a little bit here and there, because they know that they can do whatever they want.
And that's a musician's wet dream, In all honesty, like
Yeah, yeah.
if you're provided a forum to fully express yourself and still be part of a collective that is not only receptive but celebrates it, that's a win.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be great if you could be paying them like such and such
Yeah, I
amount
mean,
of money, but
yeah, I went down that path probably misleadingly. Like, it's not that important to me, except that I want to make sure that anyone who hears about the group understands how important they are,
right,
and
but
like and how wonderful they are. That.
the dividends are in the finished product,
Well, that was why it's coming out. The record is actually 8 freedoms, not 4. So I did the 4 released to myself on Bandcamp. The record's going to be 8 of them.
Mhm.
Which were more or less put together at the same time. I did one more session after the 4 were finished to finish up the other 4, the second 4. But it's a double LP. That was
Yeah,
another decision, which was probably not a great marketing decision. But I thought, anyone who wants to hear 4 of these pieces would probably be interested in hearing another 4 of these pieces. And if they're
absolutely.
not interested at all, then it doesn't matter anyway.
Right, but
Right.
I think anyone forward thinking enough to even approach 2 of the 4 songs is probably gonna
Right.
go for the double album. Let's
Yeah,
face
why
it.
not? I mean, that was kind of my thinking on it. Also, no one else is ever going to say, hey, we should do a double album. No one says that.
Yeah, not
But
anymore.
Arctic Rodeo was like, yeah, we could do a double. And
If
I was
they're
like, let's do a
offering it
double.
in a
Yeah.
market that's a singles market, I mean, it's more single oriented than ever before. People don't even put out albums anymore.
Well, I
Really?
think this is a whole other ball of wax. I think that came up back in Bells when, it just happened again because of the Neil Young business with Spotify, right? But
Yeah.
we've both been around long enough to know that roughly every 5 years somebody gets up in arms about streaming.
Yeah.
And then no one knows what to do about it, so we go back to streaming, which I don't have any. I stream a lot of music myself. I
Yeah.
also buy a lot of music, but I also make a lot of music, right? Like, I'm not a regular. I'm an edge case,
Mhm.
Uh, but the that's the music business. I'm not in the music business. I own a stationery store. That's the
Yeah.
business I'm in.
Yeah.
So
Which is
my wife and I sell pens and birthday cards. Like, that's what we do. Uh,
and
I make music because that's something I do, but I don't need it to compete with. I don't know who I'm not competing with anyone.
no, you have
You
Measure
know,
Twice, and that's taking care of everything at
that pays
home.
my part of the bills. Yep. And then but so, like, when I release, if I want to put out a record, be it a Bells record that I can afford to release myself, or a New Freedom where someone else comes to me and says, we'd like to release this. Uh, that's just its own. It is actually not related to any other product or item. It's
Mhm.
just it's itself. So I don't have to worry about whether people are buying it or streaming it, or I don't know. Do people still pirate music? Like, it almost seems like it's not worth the hassle because you can
No,
just
it's
stream it,
not.
like,
Ye
or Bandcamp, like, I would much rather have people listening to it at Bandcamp, which I know is at least a cool website,
Yeah,
and like a reasonable group of people doing good work, who like
Bandcamp has been
music.
so good for the independent music business. My band, it keeps us going, and like
Oh yeah,
legitimately.
I can't. I have a lot of respect for what they do, and I
Mhm.
think they are very conscious of doing it as well as they can.
Yeah.
And they're explicit about that. They're like, we're trying to do the best we can, and I think that's really, that's cool. But I'm not even sure that's I think the beauty of Bandcamp is you can be, a kind of semi-pro like myself and yield all of its benefits, or you could be like an actual pro and yield all of its benefits, or you could be somebody who's just home banging out songs,
Yep.
putting them up on Bandcamp. Like, you don't have to. All you need is some music, and you can use Bandcamp. And I think the idea that there are these economies that have nothing to do with music business, have nothing to do with royalties or licensing or stream, the war on streaming or Spotify or any of that. It has to do with I've been making music pretty much my whole life, and I want to do that with people I like.
Yeah.
And I have a friend with a recording studio right here in Baltimore, so I can book time at my friend's studio and get my other friends there, and then we can go make some music.
And you're so excited about this. It's incredible that you can, at this point in your life, still have a musically viable idea that is so intoxicating to you that you can move forward and build on it. Not everybody
I think that's in some ways contingent on not being in the music business.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely.
Like I'm gonna go see a friend of mine, the painter Lyle Kissack, who's among other things, his paintings on the cover of the New Freedom record. But he played drums in a band called Candy Machine that we used to tour with years ago, and he plays drums in a band here in Baltimore called Boyster. The guy's like a key influence in my life and one of the warmest people I know. I love the guy, and I can't wait to go see what he's working on. And I suppose, Lyle is a professional artist. I don't think he does anything else for a living.
Mm-hmm.
He teaches. He did a lot of mural work here in Baltimore over the years. But what fun to know someone who's that talented, and I can just go look at his paintings.
Yeah.
I mean, like I don't have to book time at a gallery. I mean, I had to call him last week and say, hey, what are you doing next week?
Yeah.
Like I'll be down for practice. I have a little extra time. Let's go, and he says, yeah, like come let's see what's going on. And I think that's the way a lot of this works for music, like some of us used to have, used to be professionals or found some other work like Jay with the studio, stays sort of in music, but it's not always that he's performing it.
Yeah.
And all through the years, like we can still find places to play. And I'm not speaking of Jawbox so much as I am like the rest of my life, ticket sales are much lower for Bell's shows than for Jawbox shows, like I said,
Yeah.
but we can still find places to play and other bands to play with and people to sort of do it all with and make friends along the way. And we don't have to worry about any of that stuff, about what the industry has to say about any of it, because we're just not, any more than we would worry about like what the farming industry has to say about it. Like it's simply not our business, And I think should one come to that conclusion about one's music, so much easier.
Because
much easier.
You're living it. You're not. It's not something that is so pre-planned and regimented that it sucks the fun out of it. That's just not happening.
Well, that's the goal of like getting more streams. What a horrible feeling that must be,
to commodify it. Yeah.
Well, if that's how you have to make your living, that's something you have to worry about. Like I respect that, but I'm also really grateful that it's not my problem, because I wouldn't know. I mean, I've always assumed that the best way to promote something is to be good at it, which is not true.
Yeah, but that was the case back where we're from before the internet.
I think probably, but I remember years ago reading I think it was when Radiohead was giving away In Rainbows, right? Remember they released that and it was free or something.
Yep.
And there was a lot of grumbling about it, which seemed insane to me. Like, I don't know why anybody would grumble. I'm not a Radiohead fan, really, but I wouldn't grumble about a free Radiohead record.
No, why would you?
A real burden,
Yeah, or like when you
remember reading Mike Doty, who had been in Soul Coughing.
I love. Listen,
back in the day.
Here's how much I love Mike Doughty. That's his new album.
Oh yeah. So I mean,
Love him.
I, I used to know Mike. We sort of, we're like old dogs at the same dog run.
Yeah.
But, Mike, he's another guy. He's managed to continue make a living doing this. But my guess is there have been aspects of that have been very difficult to keep track of,
Yeah.
But Mike's point at the time of the In Rainbows thing was like, of course they can afford to give away a record, right?
Yeah.
They're Radiohead, and they have but they became that because they had been on major labels and they had been promoted and they had been supported and all of those things that go, the advantages if you're in the music industry of receiving support from the music industry, they had those advantages. So, if the argument was that we should all be giving away our records, well, that's preposterous.
That's
Right?
ridiculous.
Because most of us can't afford to do that. But if you can, do what you want. Why not do it? Oh, let me lose that. There we go. But I think that's an interesting point to make, which is that, like I did have the support of a major label for a few years, and that's probably how you heard of me.
Well, no, I was a Discord head.
Oh, okay. Well,
I mean,
but certainly a lot of people heard of us, because we had Savory, or we were on Beavis and Butthead, or they saw us open for Stone Temple Pilots, and I don't know that those are people we still know, but I think,
in my case,
my guess is anybody who made it to Bell's probably made it to Bell's because they were Jawbox fans.
Yeah, definitely.
Initially, anyway.
Like I discovered Jawbox because I was already into Fugazi, because I had already been into Minor Threat and all that. But like I came to the hardcore scene when I was like 11 years old, 12 years old. I was in my first hardcore band in 1987, 88. But for the majority of the people who were into your music, definitely there was that whole 120 minutes of it all, and you know what I mean,
which is legit. I mean, like we
and
chose
it's legitimate.
That,
but Radiohead getting to give away a record is because they made some conglomerate a shitload of money. So of course they have that luxury. But
I just think I think again, it's there's an interview with Robert Altman, the film director, when he came back and made his comeback was this movie called The Player. Except it wasn't really a comeback. He made a movie a year his entire career. He just wasn't. He was doing it in Paris, which of course wouldn't matter to Hollywood, right? So, but this was his return to Hollywood. And this interview, the Yutz who was interviewing him said something like, what's it like to be back? And he was like, well, I make a movie a year. Like I'm not exactly like out of shape.
Yeah.
And the guy said, well, but this is Hollywood. And he said, yeah, but it's like I think the way he said it is they're making gloves and we're making shoes. Like it looks like sort of the same thing. But it's not the same thing. Like it's leather, it's got some stitching, but it's not it's not supposed to do the same thing, and it's not made in the same place. And thanks for having me. Was the gist of it. And I keep that, I think about that a lot because, when civilians find out that you play drums, they want to know more about that because drums are awesome.
Sure.
Right. Like, and exciting. And most people don't play drums. So it's also a cool thing to do. But, they don't want to hear about bells. No, they don't, like, not really, you know what I mean? Like Jawbox is a little more interesting because if they're of a certain age, they might have come across us somewhere along the way. But I think like I guess I just think that, where I started with this never ending rant, that I think most of us, and this connects to what you were saying earlier about opinions, like I think most of us think that we're supposed to, there's some value in a contribution we're making to something that doesn't actually involve us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ends up being kind of heartbreaking, because we keep banging our heads against these walls. And this could be like a Facebook group about, I don't know, the Allman Brothers, you know, like
Yeah.
that you're supposed to prefer some, Fillmore to Eat a Peach or something.
Right.
And like, you could work yourself up into a real froth, like a serious emotional position, arguing with someone you'll never see and who doesn't care, like arguing with them about this, like, or you could just go throw on Eat a Peach.
Yeah.
And get back to looking at cat videos or whatever, like, and enjoy yourself. Like I think there's a version of that in most areas of life. And it's like you don't even see it coming. And suddenly, you're typing with your thumbs frantically to make your point before someone else does, right? Like,
yeah.
Or you could just get all your friends together and make a record. It's been my kind of evolution of that, and we all still sit around and think like, wow, is there a way to get paid for doing this? And most of the time there isn't,
not unless you're selling t-shirts, hats, and socks and stickers and
or like Mark. Mark teaches. He's he teaches music to kids. He gives private lessons, and he plays in 80 different bands.
That guy's a living legend. I mean, truly, like everything.
Yeah. Like chances are, if to a certain extent, if there's a band that's kind of garagey and punky that you used to like and they're back, he might be playing guitar for them.
Yeah, it's a distinct possibility.
Like he's really good at playing that kind of music, and I think his association with Kid Congo puts him in a really good light for that sort of work, but again, like I feel like when I put my little studio together, part of what I was thinking was, that I might have a friend out there who wants me to play drums on something. And because of COVID, or because now, the last couple of years we opened the shop, I can't just leave town the way I used to.
Yeah.
I could track something at home, send it over, which is sort of the opposite of how New Freedom works. But, the mindset's the same, which is how can we do this together?
Yeah.
And I don't find that. I mean, I don't know where else one collaborates that way. Like other than music, I don't know where. Sports, like I appreciate that there's teamwork, but so you're trying to win. Restaurant work, there's always the front of house versus back of the house, like knowing, but there's no real team in this. Like there's no enemy in this. There's no opponent. There's no, and that you know what I mean? That sense of like, okay, we're not quite sure what this is going to be, but let's do it anyway.
Well, I mean, to me, that's where the intellectualism of the pursuit lies, because it's not.
Sure.
You're not trying to fix anything. You're not trying to fight against anything. You're trying to just you're not even trying to express anything singular or specific. You're just trying to make something happen.
It's really, I mean, I the phrase I like is musical event, which I don't generally use in public, but I think it describes both the kind of the whole event of everybody being there together, which could be a show, which could be the studio. And then it also describes, kind of internally, when does someone play? The moment that Mark commences blowing into a saxophone, that's a musical event. The moment he stops is a musical event. The moment I grab one of my cowbells is a musical event. The moment Gordon draws his bow or Janet sings, or like each of those things is an event. And how does one get that across sort of without intruding on it with one's own, like you said, like one point of view, like how do you maintain a group point of view? I think one of the things that turned me off to working with singers for many years was I didn't want one point of view dominating the music, so if you're an instrumental rock band, immediately you can dispense with that.
Yeah, it's amorphous at that
I mean,
point.
even if the music isn't, and we used to joke in Bells, when the guys were tuning their guitars or whatever, and say, like, if you're waiting for the singer, you can stop. Like, no one's coming. I think it's refreshing for both of my instrumental bands were really instrumental bands for people who like singers. I think like we were pretty conscious of writing songs,
and
but again
vocal melodies with guitars,
or drums. There's always something that, like, you're like any drummer I know who actually tunes their drums understands that what you have in front of you is a chord. Like you have any one of however 1 to 5 to 15 different pitches in front of you. But I like all that stuff. I mean, I like reading what other musicians are thinking, and I like thinking about music, and I like, I think there is a kind of I don't know if it's study exactly. It might be more contemplation, about kind of just thinking about music. Thinking about what does it do and where does it come from. I came across this unusual book. Alex Ross, who's the classical music critic for the New Yorker, wrote a wonderful book 10 years ago or so called The Rest is Noise, which is a kind of history of modern 20th century classical music, about which I knew nothing until I read that book. And I was reading, he had some stuff to say about Spotify, and I was reading something by him, and I came across a book he referred to called The Hatred of Music. So I had to look into this, right? Because what a horrible title for a book.
Well, who the fuck hates music?
Well, so the guy who wrote this, whose name escapes me suddenly, was sort of a premier promoter of classical music festivals, and one year quit everything and wrote this book. And he had kind of arrived at this view of music that it became a soundtrack and a harbinger of genocide and violence and terrible, terrible things. And I mean, I'm only about 20 pages into this thing, and I can't read a lot of it at a time because it's pretty grim. But his point is, I mean, he might, for all I know, the guy suffered from any one of a number of, disorders, but his point seems to be like that's how powerful this can be.
Well, I mean, if you look at Wagner in relation to, the Nazi Party,
sure,
there are correlations.
Actually, Alex Ross wrote a book. His most recent book was about Wagner's presence in culture up to the current period, and how Wagner's used for all kinds of things. Again, I'm not a Wagner fan. I'm an Alex Ross fan, but just reading about, like, every generation has its own version of Wagner, which I just think is crazy because I only know about him, Nazis and Apocalypse Now. Like, that's all the Wagner I know, which is basically Nazis and Nazis, right? Like, it's the same.
Same thing. But there's something relative in there, because, like, how many people probably committed suicide to Rachmaninoff's music? There's
sure,
and it's like what it really.
I guess it brings to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The music or the misery?
And I think there's certainly
chicken and egg.
Sort of claim. You can claim. Like I have a very low threshold for metal. After about 1983, I don't understand what happened with metal, and so I'm a real dummy. There's too many genres, like there's genres and subgenres, and I'm completely lost on it after, like, Ride the Lightning or Power Slave. Those seem to be the last two metal records I bought. And I haven't owned either of them in, a very long time, to be fair. But my assumption about it has been, particularly among, men my age who are into it, and it's, of course, almost all men, is that it presents this kind of version of aggression and masculinity and, out of lack of a better term, darkness, and kind of suffering and relief from suffering almost simultaneously, with no consequences. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can really kind of inhabit this music and let it wash over you, and then take your kid to school, and you kind of end up with the best of all worlds, because you get the cathartic value of it, and you get the kind of thunderous value of it, but you don't have to disappear because of it, you know. And
Right.
I think part of what part of the coming from the punker side of things, like, we never worried much about the thunderous part of it. You know, like, there
Yeah.
was a whole kind of side of music that just didn't. I don't know if it didn't interest me or my pals, or if we just weren't good at it, or how we ended up on our side. But it has always seemed to me more important to bring some joy to the situation, uh, than dread. Like,
Well,
that the
there was
idea
both.
of being able to supersede the, to overcome the dread.
Well,
I
it's
don't know where
inherently
that.
positive. Well,
I
it's
think so.
where we come from. Like, as much as I like metal, hardcore, and especially that era, it was about overcoming negativity.
Yeah,
It was about embracing joy, and it was bombastic, but bombastic in a way that was not nugatory to any stretch of the imagination. There was not
sure,
that,
sure.
like, there was nothing really, like, except if we're talking about like De Croixon or something, there was some menace to it, but not really.
No, and
Not
it was. I
really.
think I read somewhere that, I can't remember who it was. It was someone notable from our generation, and they were talking about how, it was important to our generation to appear tough. That, like,
Mm,
this was part of what. So, you know, a lot of us had wallet chains. No one was really in danger of losing their wallet, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we didn't need a chain to secure the wallet,
Hmm.
and there wasn't anything in it anyway. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
had
We
an
were all
empty
broke.
wallet chain. Yeah.
The most expensive I had in my pocket was my dialer. Remember the dialers? That was it.
Mine might have been the chain on my wallet. You know, like, actually, I never wore a wallet chain. I had a chain for my pocket watch, but it was
Yeah,
just, the principle was the same. You know, it was like, carrying a Zippo, and, like, I just thought plastic disposable lighters were for the birds. You know,
yeah.
uh, and I think there was a kind of, I think that was in the music. You know, and coming from, one of the things I loved about the DC bands, I guess it was true all of them, but it seemed more prominent to me in those bands. Like, when they were playing, it was rough.
Oh
They
yeah.
were jumping around and sweating and going bananas. But as soon as the show was over, they were like, "Thanks for coming out." Like,
Oh
everything was.
yeah.
Jay
There was.
Jay actually was one of the real progenitors of that style, of this kind of, like, while he's playing the song, everything is cool, but the moment it's over, he's like, "Oh God, like, where's my tuner?" And, you know, falling apart. And then, out on the floor afterwards, like, we're just saying, like, "Hey, thanks for coming out. Thanks for buying the shirt." Whatever it is. Uh,
But
but
that was
there's
that whole
something, like, that you
proletariat.
could. Well, but you could also have a whole other personality when you were playing,
Yeah.
and then you could almost, like, we talked a lot about it in Bells, that if you came out to see the band, that hour or half hour or whatever shouldn't be like the rest of your day. It should be distinct from whatever else is happening in your life. And I think that was implicit years ago. That, like, if you went to, you go, whatever, deliver pizzas or whatever your crappy job was, and then, Sunday mornings you get to go to a show,
Yep.
because it was always on a Sunday morning.
And that's where the
Load-in was
love.
at noon. Yeah, and you
That's
go
where
and
the
you
love was.
get to see Scream, or
Yeah.
whatever it was, uh, and then the rest of your week would suck,
Hmm.
you know. Except band practice would be fun,
Yeah.
which maybe if you were lucky you did 5 nights a week or something, But, like, I think I still have that sense of even coming down here for rehearsals, uh, like it's fun to play drums in Jawbox.
Hmm.
Like, it's I I'm I won't be able to do it forever. you know I
Yeah.
feel that now. Like, it gets harder and harder every year to pull that off, it seems. uh but I'm still doing it, and it's Brooks is a great addition to the band. I mean, we all know Brooks. It's not like we just found some guitar player to take Bill's place. Like, we know this guy, and Jay's of course worked with him for over. It's got to be. I think he's been working with Brooks for like almost 15 years now. So it's all still in the family. But I get that on a good week, I'll get that buzz when I'm driving. I get up at whatever 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm already on the road to come down here.
Yeah.
But I get that buzz, like, oh, it's going to be good. Like, I'm going to practice. This will be fun.
Yeah.
And it is. But I wonder sometimes about people who play grimmer music. It must still be fun.
It's
right?
still
Or they wouldn't do it.
It's still cathartic for them. It's still cathartic.
But I can't imagine if I was in a metal band, I don't think I'd want to practice at 10 in the morning.
No, probably not.
That seems like I know the guys I share my space with at home, they all play metal. I'm the only one who's there in the morning. Like, I go over like 8 in the morning, so I can play before the shop opens. They're always there at night.
Yeah. Of course.
They're night creatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's we were always separate from that, because metal was always the fantasy and punk was always reality.
Yeah. I think I avoid saying that because I feel like I'm discrediting something, but
no,
the longer
this is coming from someone who loves them both, and that's the truth. That's the truth of the meat of it is like, that's Dungeons and Dragons. This is what's going on this week.
Right.
This is CNN.
Yeah.
This is Fox News,
Right.
So to me,
I think too that back then, and this is still true. Like, I don't know that you don't even have to necessarily be like really good at your instrument. You can also just get out there and do what you want.
mm-hmm.
Play what you want. So I think once we figure out what it means to be safe with COVID, I think that's still very much up in the air.
Yeah.
We'll start to see people just playing again. That it's not. I think one of the things I love about these Jawbox shows that we're still doing this year. Opening for Jawbreaker is going to be great.
Yeah.
It's a major musical event for a lot of people, and that we're included. We're excited about that. But I sometimes kind of like being able to play, and it's not such a big deal. Like,
yeah,
like it. I mean, it's a different kind of thing. Like, I think when people come out to see Jawbox, even if they're new fans or younger fans who didn't get to see us, younger meaning 45, right? They might have missed us the first time around.
Yeah.
They lived in Florida and we didn't play that part of Florida or something. They're really coming out for this experience. They have an idea about this before they get there.
Yeah.
They heard from somebody else. They read something. Their dad used to go see us, whatever it is. And I think sometimes that can personally, that can be kind of a strain, because I feel like I'm trying to measure up to something I did when I was, much better suited to it, just younger. You know what I mean? Like, I had some ideas when I was 24 that I would not have now. And actually, Jay and it was really bugging me when we first started practicing in 2019. And Jay's line was, it's the same but different, like, it's not. And that proved to be true. Like, I don't think we disappointed anyone out there who came out to see us. I think we all had a good time.
Definitely.
And even though now, like, I play larger drums, and Jay, has pedals. He didn't used to have pedals, right? Like,
yeah,
it is a different kind of experience, but I don't think anyone was like, they just don't sound like themselves. I mean, we sound like ourselves.
The sound was there. Believe me, the sound was there.
And I think that's that's the part of this that's in some ways been the most rewarding of the reunion, is to, like, speaking for myself, I'm better than I was. I'm a better drummer than I was. I'm a nicer person than I was.
I think
It makes everything easier,
I think the musicianship is more important now than it was then too, because like being that you're all
yeah.
accomplished musicians at this point, you're worried more about the way it's not just about the ferocity of the presentation now, it's about the content of the actual
well, we're definitely tuned into each other more than we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, frankly, I don't know, looking back on it, my general view hasn't changed much, which is that where I prefer to be when I'm playing is almost out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I want it should be harder for me to do than it is for you to hear,
Yeah.
And I still, I'm an idiot. And if I walk away from a show and something didn't break or fall down, or I don't have some nick or cut or something on my fingers, like I wasn't trying hard enough.
Yep.
And I know that's lunacy.
But that's
but it's still, I want to know for my own satisfaction that there's some point where I was just out past what I can do. Whatever my limit is, that there's some part of the set where I'm like, I am in over my head here.
you left your pound of flesh on the scale. That's what it comes down to.
Something like that. I think if I'm always within, I was the guitarist Joe Morris wrote a book about improvisation, and one of the things he says in there is that a musician can't play something they don't know how to play. Like, it's impossible for a musician to play something they don't know how to play. So this idea that improvising, that improvisers don't know what they're doing, is immediately dismissed because it's impossible. You can't go from this note to this note, or from this to this, if you don't know what those are. However, he says the musician might be learning while they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, because I don't play very much improvised music, my version of that is to lean a little harder, lean into it a little harder than is probably wise. But like, my guess is by 60, my wrists would have hurt anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like my elbows would be freaked out anyway, or my knees would be a wreck anyway. So if this is how I got there, I'm totally open to that.
Of course, because there was love involved the whole way. It's not like you were burning your body to shreds like on a construction site,
right?
And
it's a choice. And I feel like we were saying before, really, like, if you're making music, you're never quite alone. No. Somebody's out there. One of the guys I grew up with, a piano player named Kevin McKendry, who's in Nashville, who I've known for 40 years now. I used to go see him. He's a blues piano player, and I used to go see him play this bar gig. I think it was like every Sunday night. It was some horrible night at some horrible bar out in suburban Virginia. And but to be fair, he was like making a living playing piano at 20, But there was this one couple that used to come out every week. And at the time, they struck me as awfully old. They were probably in their 40s. And they would dance through both sets. They would dance for like 3 hours. And I just remember thinking, and I would think, like, what are they dancing to? Like, they must bring their own thing to this. They're not dancing to this band. And one night we were driving back to Kevin's. I was like, man, I just don't get it with these people. They come out, they dance every week. And he said, man, every band is someone's favorite band.
Yep.
And I thought, that's right. Like, you guys are their favorite band. My favorite band at the time was either Shudder to Think, Jawbox, or Fugazi.
Yeah.
Their favorite band was these knuckleheads, playing for tips at a wings bar,
Yeah.
but that's how it went. And I think that there's something about that I still find very comforting, like whatever you're doing. Yeah, I was nervous when I was working on the New Freedom stuff. I was like, who's going to listen to this?
A lot
Like,
of
I didn't
people.
know anybody, but well, and Jay was very reassuring and said, man, like it's authentic and somebody's going to find it. Like whoever needs to find it is going to find it. And that's how that's going to go. Like, that's all that happens anymore.
And it really is kind of like, for someone like me, it's what's next. It's like, holy shit, this is what's next. We still have something to be excited about. For you to stumble upon something like this and to curate it, there should be a real pride in not ownership but in the curation, because you're not only helping mastermind it, but you're collecting these pieces.
I mean, I think of it as a kind of stewardship, like it's a delivery
Exactly.
of something. But I was talking to this guy I was talking to last night. His name's Greg Giuffre. He plays drums and Pilot to Gunner, among other things. But I had a hard drive of his from Jay. He was picking up at the shop, and he's eager to get started on some solo stuff. And he was talking about how what he's trying to do is get his vision kind of out, and the best way to do that right now is to do it with do it himself. And I was struck by the realization that I have no vision at the outset except who's going to be there, like I think it's a great idea to have more flute, more recorders, and a viola, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with those things. You know what I mean? Like, I just know that the whole MO is kind of so far so good.
Yeah.
But as far as satisfying a vision, that doesn't happen until much later,
But that's the dichotomy. That's the dichotomy between classical and jazz. You're not not a classicist. It's almost like you're going for that.
Certainly, I'm closer to that. I mean, I feel closer to that, and I think either, it's not a question of one being valid and the other not, right? It really is just a question, I think, of what, of how, I guess just how it's supposed to feel, what it's supposed to do for you. So, like, I was really pleased that New Freedom made some people's best of the year lists. I got a fair amount, given the number of people who bought it, which wasn't a lot, but it was certainly more than I expected. A lot of people wrote me to tell me how it fit into their year, how it fit into their, into their grief, or into the kind of listening they'd been doing during COVID, or the kind of something they'd been wanting to hear, but this, now it exists, right? Like, this was the thing they'd been wanting to hear, and now they know where to get it. Or and other people were like, why aren't you drumming more? Like, which is fine. And my answer is because, right? Like, I don't really have an answer to that, but
it wasn't what you wanted to do with this project. That's the answer.
It's a different band. Yeah, it's a different project. And I think, but being able to sort of take part in all of that, it's just really encouraging, like being put in touch with you. I'm still not exactly sure what my relationship with Tim is.
Right.
Like, he had worked with Gordon on maybe the Jawbreaker on cello record or something. He worked with Gordon on one of his records in the past. So when we were putting this out, Gordon said, "Hey, do you mind if I bring this guy onto this?" And I, no, as long as he's not a Nazi, everybody's welcome as long as they're not a Nazi. And he's just, occasionally something cool will come up, like hearing from you, or my best of the year for Brooklyn Vegan. Like, these are opportunities to sort of talk to people about this stuff, or to just even be out there this way.
Well,
I wouldn't know how to deal with that. I mean, I don't know how to seek that stuff out anymore. You know what I mean? And it's nice to have, it's nice to have, I mean, like we said at the beginning of this, everywhere I go, I'm Zach from Jawbox, right? There's
Right.
but I also don't feel, I think there's a stretch in my late 20s, where in my early 30s, where I felt like I needed to be rid of that, and I think what it really was that I was certain I wasn't living up to it, like like you know chronic alcoholism and not making music was not the legacy I anticipated for myself. But whatever, you turn around what you can, and you come up with what you can, and it but I don't mind it at all now. I mean, it's still, it's how I know anybody. It's how I met my wife. You know what I mean? Uh, it's how anybody, really, it's how anybody comes to find where I am.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful for that. And I don't. It's no accident. Like, we were a hardworking band, but it's still sometimes kind of a surprise. I think, like, again, kind of where we started with this, that to shift gears and have anybody shift with me is already more than I would think to ask for,
Right.
because really nobody has to do anything. No one has to. Everyone, I mean, I know people who still just, the same playlist they would have had in 1992, and good for them. They found their spot. But
Sure.
I
mean, but
prefer
this,
the adventure. I prefer the other stuff. I prefer the Insect record to other Neurosis records.
right. Right.
Because I don't understand. I was thinking about this with photography, that, like, good photographs are either something strange in and of itself, somebody wearing a weird outfit or something,
Mhm.
even, or a story we can't quite imagine.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's kind of what a good photograph, good photograph is, one or both of those things. And I think that's true of music too. Like, there has to be enough familiarity so you're like, okay, this is music.
Yeah.
Right.
But
But after that, it's anybody's game, really. You could be I'm always surprised by some of the stuff I come across. I mean, I'm looking for it, but some of the sound artists, or even people I know to be, David Grubbs, who's a regular musician.
mhm.
I've been following Grubbs since Bastro was when I met him. And Gastro del Sol was, Bastro was a strange band, and then Gastro del Sol was a strange band, and his solo career has been kind of strange.
Yeah.
And I always look forward to the next thing he's doing, even if it's more kind of warped folk music or whatever. He does that side of things. And then there's been a bunch of stuff lately where he's playing electric guitar, which I again, I don't really know where it's going when I drop the needle, but I know it's an electric guitar. So I
Yeah.
feel, the records he's done with the poet Susan Howe, who's one of my favorite poets. Most music and poetry records are terrible. Most of them are awful,
Especially
these, however, are great, like,
even you go back
they,
to the Doors, like that Jim Morrison
oh God,
poetry
they're
record.
my least favorite band of all time.
See, I grew up. My dad was a jazz drummer, but he loved the Doors. But there's that Doors record where Jim Morrison's reading poetry, and I would love to, just, if I could burn it, I would.
For everyone, right?
For everyone, for everyone. The whole world doesn't need this, but there's the only time I think poetry and jazz came off well on recording would have been when jazz and poetry intersected, which would be via the beat.
There's, and even more recently, there's a wonderful poet named Nathaniel Mackey,
Yeah,
who is a
yep.
jazz inflected poet.
Yeah,
And his novels are kind of about jazz. It's not, they're certainly about a group of musicians. I don't know if he would characterize it as jazz music necessarily, but he did a record. I don't know. It's probably 20 years ago now. And he was so tuned into the music, like the music wasn't responsible for him.
Mhm.
So he was able to just tune into what they were doing and kind of bring his poetry to it. And I think he was much more sensitive to the idea that the poetry had to be another instrument,
Yeah.
or something like that. His voice was another instrument. But I mean, most of the time it's really not very good music with not very good poetry. And I think the way Grubbs and Susan House solved that problem was to be kind of airtight before they showed up.
Mhm.
And of course, I'm sure Grubbs is well versed in her work, and was able to bring that. But just to the point though that he's a guy I keep an eye on.
Mhm.
I always want to know what he's doing, because Robert Lowe, who was in 90 Day Men and more recently scored Candyman,
Mhm.
everything Rob does is interesting to me. He works mostly with modular synthesizers, and it all cues from a vocal, and then he kind of lets the whole thing, or forces the whole thing to unfold. I've seen him do it live several times. I have a bunch of his records. It's always interesting to me. I have no idea how it's done. I don't know anything about the process, and in some ways that keeps it, it's like
The
when
mi-
the mystery. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's the mystique.
yeah.
You
There's
know,
that
yeah.
scene in A Woman Under the Influence, the Cassavetes movie, where everybody comes over after they've been working all night, and Mabel makes everyone. Is it Mabel?
I believe it is. Yeah.
I think it's Mabel. Yeah, and she makes everyone spaghetti.
Yep.
And Hugh Hurd starts singing. The actor Hugh Hurd starts singing the opera, and she starts peering into his mouth. She gets right up in his mouth before everything falls apart. But
Yeah.
there's that moment where you can, like, I know that feeling, or I think I do, of just being like wanting to get right up to the bell of the horn, or wanting my head in the kick drum, or up against the amplifier, or right up in their mouth. There's somehow getting closer to it will reveal more.
Hmm.
And it never does, right? I mean, that's not the way it works, but there's a sense of wanting that intimacy,
Yeah.
you
That
know?
being that close to the impetus of the muse, really.
Yeah, yeah. Like that you can, and there's a Dave Hickey essay about Chet Baker,
Oh,
and
I love.
how Chet Baker's singing, that anytime prior to when he started singing, microphones didn't work for that. Like, you couldn't crowd a mic like that and sing that quietly and sing that softly,
Mhm.
uh, as he did. And I thought, like, that's totally what it is. Like, I can only listen to Chet Baker in a room. I can't listen to him on headphones.
Yeah.
You're way too close to my ear.
Mhm.
I don't want him that close to some people, maybe, but not him. Like, because he's looking for my wallet. Like,
Yeah.
I know that about him.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's, again, I think it's like you're saying, it somehow brings you closer, or the dream is that it brings you closer to where that music is coming from. And it never does. Like, all you do is have your head in a kick drum. Like, there's
Yeah.
no
And you're just damaging your ears. But
right. You're not closer to the beat. Yeah, you're just getting a headache.
but it's that feeling of discovery, of wanting a tactile experience out of an ethereal event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. I do. I mean, there were moments when Lenny first came and joined us for New Freedom. None of us knew him. I mean,
Mhm.
it was really I think, an act of tremendous courage on his part. We all know each other. He drove from Pittsburgh to Baltimore, which isn't that far, but it's not that close either. Uh, because he and I had exchanged some emails, and he had tracked on one of the previously finished pieces at home and sent it to me, and I was like, "You should come out." And he was like, "Okay." And so when he we're all in the control room, and he's in the live room, uh, and he wets his reed and tunes up or whatever, warms up a little bit, and then he's like, "Okay, well, let's just roll it." And like the minute he started playing, the four of us were, I think our friend Matt might have been assisting on that day. We're just laughing because there was no way to account for any of this. The
Mhm.
sounds he was making, like, none of us have a whole lot of experience with oboes, uh, or anyone that good. cold. He just walked in and started playing the perfect thing. Like it was in, and I think the kind of one of the effects of the the physical proximity to that ethereal moment is that one has to emote immediately.
Yeah.
Like you can't hold it in. So you're either going to cry or shout at someone or laugh. And under the circumstances, laughter was how it went. But it's a real. I still, when I work on that stuff, it's a drag because I'm alone. But I still find myself laughing at kids. I'll get something in the right spot, and I'll be like, and just start laughing with myself, and then I'll send it to Gordon, and we laugh together, laugh emojis or whatever. But I think in a lot of ways that's always the goal: is how do you? We know we can create these transcendent moments, but what are we transcending to? Like we know we're transcending, right? Is the daily life, right? We're trying to get above that for a little bit, but like there's something up there that we're going for, and it might be itself, right? Like it's totally possible that it's that shared experience. It's the contact with this thing that didn't exist, sort of conjured into being, like that there was no sound and now there's all the sound, but I think that's a question that's always worth asking that doesn't get asked much, is where are you hoping before you land? Like, where were you just now? What was happening up there? And is that something you can repeat? If it is, it's talent, right? That's always, if it isn't, then it was luck, but luck is cool.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with luck.
No, we could all use a little luck. Yeah.
But I think we're all trying to tune into a frequency that pre-exists and predates us. And the closer we get to it, no matter what hat you want to hang on it, the closer we get to it, the more ecstatic we become.
Well, I don't know if you had a chance to hear the massive set of Alice Coltrane.
Oh yeah.
The cassettes, and I'm blocking on the title, but it was the big double record. And I discovered I can't listen to that when I'm driving. And it's because the chanting works.
Oh yeah.
And I will actually, like, I'm suddenly not paying attention to, Third Avenue. I'm off. I don't know where I am, but I'm not on Third Avenue anymore. And I found it's really cool to walk with, because I'm not at risk of crashing into anybody. It's a milder risk.
Yeah.
But I think that music is just so weird to me. It's like finding a photograph of something and you're not quite sure what's in there,
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, to me, that's a good example of a very clear, she has a very clear target. Like her meditation, she knows what the goal is,
Yeah.
And even if I don't share it, I experience that music with her certainty as part of it,
Because she's still guiding it.
Yeah. Well, and because she knows where she's trying to end up. And I think, Coltrane, her husband, is obviously another version of this, right? That a lot of people can't listen to any so-called free music except his.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little baffled by that as a listener, because I tend to like a lot of that music. I mean, I think the idea of ensemble improvisation, like, I can't believe nobody thought of that sooner. It's such a fascinating way to go, to me.
Well, that's why, like,
but I also understand for some people it's just a lot of racket. But
I constantly bring up Kinda Blue, not because, and that is very entry level jazz, let's face it. But if you really think about it, you think about the people involved. Coltrane's involved in that. Like that's Kinda Blue was like the perfect epithet for the modal era. Like, here's the definitive statement, even though it is entry level, even though everybody and their mother owns it.
But that's probably I think it's the best selling jazz album of all time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's also, I mean, my first jazz record was either Sketches of Spain or Clifford Brown and Max Roach live at Basin Street. I can't remember. My father had both of them.
Mhm.
One of them came, I listened to first. But I remember is how different they were, because the Clifford Brown and Max Roach sides are like just kind of insane bebop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, in a lot of ways, just kind of ripping blues, like incredibly fast, incredibly well executed.
Ecstatic.
It is ecstatic. Well, I think some of Sketches of Spain probably is too, but it's couched in this, and this is probably, for the next interview when we only discuss Miles Davis.
Yeah.
like it's couched in a very specific context.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about Spain, and he's talking about how to work within the framework of those sounds. And by then, of course, they've gotten into all the editing, and it's a whole other operation making those records. But no, certainly, I think, something has to be the entry point.
Yeah.
I like
And
the first
why not?
rock band I loved was Kiss, but that didn't last nearly as long as the Beatles,
Exactly.
which turns out I still love. I think a lot of us were kind of surprised by how much we still love them after watching Get Back,
I still love the Stones too. There sometimes the like same thing with me with T-Rex. A lot of people, if you were to go back and talk to them about T-Rex, they were a fad band. They were almost like a boy band, T-Rex.
Sure.
But I'm sorry, the slider still hits me in that great way, and it's still
every band is someone's favorite band, right? That's the
yes.
That's the gist of it. And I think we, I had a real. I make no secret of this. Peter Gabriel is pretty much my guy.
Oh, I love Peter Gabriel. I
but
love
that's
that
led me in some
soundtrack.
directions. That's led me in some directions that I'm not sure I would choose again. I had a real passion for Seal's second record, the Kiss for a Rose record, when it was new.
Yeah.
Which baffled me and everyone around me. I have no idea how I don't even know where I heard it first. But two things came out of that. One was it was possible to sound like Peter Gabriel, which I think he kind of headed in that direction on that record. And the other was that I could play in 7, which I learned to do from that record. So it's not completely lost. But when I hear it now, like occasionally on a road trip or wherever there's radio, occasionally I'll hear a song from that record. I'll think, man, like I loved this.
Yeah.
I don't anymore, but there's this moment of like, wow, this was really important to me for 3 months once,
and it's a time machine.
Or something like, yeah.
Takes you right
puts me back in annoying the people around me because they didn't have the passion I did for Seal's second record,
It's funny that you say the word passion too, because that's the title of the soundtrack to The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, that's
Gabriel did, and I love that record. Oh, do I love that record?
That's a record that I don't. A lot of his stuff, particularly from So Forward, I don't know where the sounds come from. Like I don't really know what I'm listening to. Red Rain is a perfect example. I've listened to So. I can't imagine how many times I've listened to that record. I'm still not exactly sure where the chords are in Red Rain. Somebody knows because right?
Because it's
playing that song. No, yeah, there they are. But like, if you played that song for me on an acoustic guitar or on just on a piano, I'm not sure I'd believe you were playing the right chords. Just because it's got this whole idea of the song that by the time we hear it, it's so far away from whatever those chords were, And I've always assumed he writes everything on a piano, which is a pretty simple and direct way to start your song,
Sure.
But I guess if you take 8 months to mix a record, like you're already doing something I don't understand, Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to understand that. I seem to do, I'm good mixing. I'm good for like, a day, maybe 2 days. And I don't want to be there for it anymore,
Yeah. I don't know how Lustmore does it.
I'm at my
You're out.
my split point here. Yeah.
All right, my friend.
But I think we got it right. I think the phone was the solution.
Yes.
But if you have any more questions after, you get a look at this or an ear on this or anything, just let me know.
Yeah, well, I think we'll end up getting together again because we have a lot of the same ideas about music. So I think we could only go forward. But I'll hit you up after I'm done editing. And
good.
Sounds good,
Alrighty,
brother.
Thanks, man.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye now. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Zach Barocas. What a treat to sit down and speak with someone you've really admired since you were pretty much in high school. And I have to say, I wasn't disappointed. This is a gentleman who's truly ensconced in the art of creating something new, interesting, and worthwhile. I've recently spoken to Zach once more, and we will have a part 2, within which we will more than likely speak about poetry and jazz exclusively, as Zach is also, among his other accomplishments, a very accomplished poet. So until next time, folks, he's been Zach. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. Stay safe out there. And from 3:33 a.m. studios, have a wonderful night.